welcome to the Reading FC Community Trust Bite-Sized podcast, brought to you by the Premier League Primary Stars team, where we speak to practitioners from the education and football world and discuss ways we can have a positive impact on the primary PE landscape. Today we welcome Manisha Tailor, who will be discussing some behaviour management strategies within PE lessons and helping to give us some top tips for teachers.
So, good afternoon, Manisha. How are you?
Good afternoon. Yeah, very well, thank you. Enjoying the sun, as I'm sure everybody is.
Yeah, it's been amazing to be kind of back outside and to have that little bit of freedom again to enjoy the nice weather. But how's everything been for yourself? Have you been keeping busy?
Well, fortunately for me, so I also, one of my roles is I work full time at QPR at the academy, and we've been on furlough. All the academy staff have been on furlough since April. We closed the academy mid-March, but outside of the club and me taking a career change from teaching and embarking football, I also set up my company. So fortunately for me, what this time has actually allowed me to do is to kind of delve more into some projects that I've always wanted to spend a little bit more time on, and you know, since it's working full time in another job, haven't had so much the time to do. I'm also actually really enjoying a lot of the FA Learning webinars.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I love the fact that they're online, so you know you can pause, you can take notes, and there's I think a lot of educational resources out there at the moment, podcasts and webinars from other governing bodies. I know some people have said, oh, it's information overload, but I think, like with anything, at least you know it's a choice. It's there and it's available, and you can almost dip in and out. So, you know, yeah. I'm enjoying that aspect. Yeah.
No, that's brilliant. And myself and Chris, we've been on a similar route in respect of webinar, podcasts, or kind of go-to meetings, Zooms, you name it. We've done it over the last few months. So, but it's fantastic to have you with us today. I know you just kind of introduced yourself a little bit more, but could you tell us a little bit more about, obviously you started as a teacher, but you transitioned into being a sports coach specialising in football, and your business, your company, and kind of where you've got to today, because I know you've had a fantastic career so far.
Yeah, sure. So I did a BA in education, and I specialised in early childhood. And that was so I qualified in 2001 and had the opportunity in the space of 10 years, because I took my career change in 2011. I worked in a range of sectors, because at that time, I didn't envision that I would take a career change. It wasn't that, you know, I spent time at university. I went on numerous placements to help, you know, to help me along my teaching pathway, that I thought, right, I'm just going to do this, and then I'm just going to now work in football. I've always loved football through playing with my twin brother, so that's always been there. But you know, I grew up in a time where not many girls played football, and there was a real lack of opportunities, but also not many South Asian and Indian girls played football. So I very quickly understood that a career pathway in football as a player was definitely not going to be something that, you know, would be for me. And I didn't actually know that there were other roles involved in football, because I think that, as much as that might sound really silly in the sense of how can you not know, but if it's not your area of expertise and not your industry, and also if you're unaware of people that are from that industry, it's you know, you don't know. And so for me, I was aware of teaching and schools, and I knew that there could be a progression for me. So I started off, actually did my NQT year in a special measures school.
Okay.
which was an experience, really tough experience, particularly as my first teaching experience in school. And I then moved on to a private school thereafter, which again had, you know, very different to when I was in the special measure school. That was also a state school, So there were differences when I crossed over to the private sector. And from the private sector, I then went back into estate and then spent the rest of my, the remaining part of my full-time career in the state sector, and then did my trainee headship. So I got on to do the National Professional Qualification for Headship, and then took on an interim deputy headship role to assist me with that in a Church of England school. So what was great was there was an opportunity for me to gain diverse experiences. And one of the pieces of advice that I was given was that if you have ambitions of being a senior leader and progressing within education, and if one of them being, if you aspire to be a head teacher, then having that diverse knowledge and skill set would be really important, because it's then something that I could draw upon. So that's kind of what I went with. And if I'm honest, that was, in doing so, that was when I got onto the trainee headship. I was really pleased and happy, and that's where I wanted to go. But yeah, football was always a big part of my life as a teacher. So with that not the case that I had any coaching badges to begin with. Those came a little bit later, but I would just, look at the kids, and there was a real lack of, especially at that time when I first went into teaching, any extracurricular activities. So one of them being football. So it was as simple as, I like football. Can I set up a lunchtime club? Spoke to the head teacher. She said, yeah, more than happy for you to do that. And it just went from there. And then, the remaining schools that I worked in, it was pretty much doing that. And one of the schools in the latter part of my full-time career was in Brent, and we neighboured Wembley Stadium. So with that connection, that also led to meeting Rachel Yankee, because a lot of her grassroots football program was predominantly based around the area of Brent. So Rachel then spoke to me about coaching badges and said, "Oh, you do know that you can go? You're doing all this coaching with the kids at the school. Why don't you go and get some badges? Go onto your level 1." So when she said that, she said, "Just go on the County FA website and it will guide you from there." And that was pretty much it. Did my level 1, then went on to do my level 2. Rachel then invited me to also volunteer at her grassroots club that she had at the time, which was local. So I was still full-time teaching then. So I did that on the weekends, would be then, at school doing the kind of the after school clubs, the lunchtime clubs. A lot of my role then also involved liaising with like Rachel Yankee's football program and other governing bodies and organisations to use football to try and engage and help children who perhaps were underachieving, or children who we felt we needed to accelerate their learning, particularly in numeracy and literacy, but we could use sport as a tool of doing that. And that then started getting me to think, think there's a real scope for education and football. And in 2011, and it was purely home circumstance, that I came out of full-time education. And again, it was not with the idea that I had always planned this. It was more, I started my master's in leadership. My mum had a triple heart bypass. I also became a young carer 22 years ago. So there was a lot going on at the same time. The commute for me to the school that I was at was quite a lot as well. So I thought I'm just better off, finish off my dissertation, take a term out, which was what I anticipated. And then, I'd passed my MPQH. Maybe there could be a role for me in another school where I could have football and sport as a big part of it. But anyhow, that didn't happen, because as soon as a few of the people that I'd connected with found out that I was no longer a full-time teacher, fortunately, the opportunities arose. Look, not paid opportunities, voluntary opportunities for me to start gaining experience. So Rachel being one of them. So she offered for me to help and work at her football program. So it was funny because now I was actually doing the one that was covering the PPA cover, whereas when I was a full-time teacher, I had people coming in and I hardly ever taught PE because that was always my PPA cover.
Oh, reversal.
Yeah, and do you know what was really good though? It was good actually being on the other side and seeing, right, what does this look like when you are going into different schools and now you're the one who's just there to deliver the PE, but not part of anything else. So not, it's you go there and do what you have to do and then you leave. And that was a really interesting experience. I was doing one-to-one tuition, some supply teaching just to earn a little bit more money. And I was able to get some experiences at Middlesex County at the Girls Development Centre, at the Centre of Excellence, at Hampton and Richmond under Peter Gustin, and doing some stuff with, volunteering with him, just while I was still also trying to work out, what do I now actually really want to do? And in the end, for me, it just became about purpose and calling, because with my twin brother, football was always a connection. And when we were 18, when he developed his mental illness, for me, my purpose, I guess, came as a result of that experience. And I thought that, look, I could go back into full-time education, but actually I feel something pulling me towards something else. And I didn't know what it was at that time initially. So just carried on pursuing all the roles that I was getting, whether they were voluntary or whether they were paid, and then continue to do the supply teaching, the one-to-one tuition, liaising with other educational organisations like Show Races and the Red Card, like Kick It Out, where I could then offer freelance work in delivering some of their education work, which then led itself to me opening up my company, which in essence is me, where I can offer equality education and offer education around mental health, but purely from the point of view of personal experience. Not that I'm an expert in, I'm not an expert psychologist. I'm not, a psychotherapist or anything like that, but I've got 22 years of lived experience of understanding schizophrenia, depression, being a primary school teacher, and understanding actually what does this look like for children, particularly when we're talking about emotional health and well-being, and then taking the transition into football. Does it differ? Are there similarities, and what does this look like for the children? And in that context, I don't have any regrets in the respect of where I am now, because I think it was all about what drew me to where I am now. Yeah. Football's very different to education. What I soon realised was extremely male heavy in primary school. Now you've got, it's definitely changed over time, but certainly when I was full-time in primary schools, it was female heavy. When I was a senior leader, I was very much used to managing females, and coming into football, the dynamic's very different. And I'm still learning, but I've had to, one thing is about learning and taking on the qualifications and learning the trade of football, and the, different people's philosophies, particularly dependent on where you're working and who you're working for. The other part of it, which I found really challenging, was also being a minority, but a minority in twofold. So a minority as a female, but also a minority as somebody who's of Indian heritage. And I'm fortunate that through my experiences, I've had some great mentors. So Alex Welsh being one of them, Peter Augustine, like Matthew Joseph, Chris Ramsey at QPR now, that if it's not for people like them, like Charlotte Edwards when she was at Middlesex, if it's not for people like them, I feel that my journey perhaps wouldn't have progressed and developed as much. Yeah. And the other thing that I feel has really helped is the fact that we talk about diversity and skill set, that I may not have been an ex-pro, I may not have had as much academy experience or football experience as other people, but what I was able to offer was an understanding of pedagogy, an understanding of child development. I was willing to learn. I was willing to, go in and volunteer, and still continue to do that above my role, and quite happy, to be honest, about where I am in my journey in football, and understand that actually where's my skill set better suited. And that's where, go back to like people like Chris Ramsey, for example, and Alex Carroll, who's our academy director at QPR, really good at helping me map out what my strengths are, like no different to what we might do with the players and the kids. And how can you use those strengths and transfer and apply that into this context? And I think, everything's about humility. If you can be humble enough and be self-aware and understand where you are in your journey, you're already halfway there in actually being able to progress. And I think if it's not for people like Chris and Alex, it would become really difficult for me, because they're better equipped in understanding the context of football than I am. I'm still, I started working at QPR in 2016. I took my career change in 2011. But I still feel I'm quite young in understanding academy football in comparison to many others who've been in it a lot longer than I have. But I always, I go back to having people that can help nurture your development, and also the transferable skill set is helping me. And I think if it's not for that, then perhaps I wouldn't be where I am now in my journey.
Oh, and I mean, what an amazing journey that is.
Yeah, completely agree.
Anyone who's listening to this will be thinking, wow, you've done so much across so many different sectors. And you touched on it there, that transferability of those skills and of those skill sets, because something that has certainly become apparent to me through doing these podcasts is actually there's so much that teachers learn from coaches. There's so much that coaches learn from teachers. There's so much that teachers and coaches are learning, particularly around mental health is massive and is growing and needs to keep growing in terms of understanding. So I'm really confident that some of the stuff we're going to go through now is going to be really useful for anyone who listens, whether they be from the coaching or the teaching sort of background. So is it all right if we sort of jump in on some sort of behaviour management tips? Is that all right?
Yeah.
So brilliant. So something that comes across to us in our sort of normal day-to-day work when we're working with sort of often quite new teachers, newly qualified teachers, but sometimes experienced teachers as well, is the difference between behaviour management within the classroom environment and the sort of the PE environment, whether that's indoor, outdoor, or whatever it is, and often that having an effect on the teacher's confidence. So how would you sort of look at that and maybe try and address those concerns, or maybe even give some sort of simple little top tips that can really sort of help them to be a bit more confident and just develop their practice?
Yeah. So funny enough, I hardly taught PE, because PE was always my PPA cover. And sometimes now looking back, I think, oh, did I become de-skilled because of that? And now, we're thinking about PE, and I'll relate this to football purely because what I was able to transfer around behaviour management strategies and intervention strategies when we're working with young people was actually just having an understanding, first foremost, and taking out the fact that it's PE or a classroom, is having an understanding of the root of these behaviours. So I think the first thing is actually what do these behaviours look like? How well do we understand what they are, and where have they come from? So what's caused these behaviours? You can then apply that to whether you're coaching a football or basketball session, to whether you're in the classroom. And I think that a lot is also about your own self-confidence. So if you're somebody who is a lot more confident in being in your classroom where you're delivering your day-to-day lessons, you will naturally be more confident in how you manage some of those behaviors. When you take it out of that and now you're teaching PE, me included, initially, I'm sporty, but it didn't mean to say that I was a confident PE teacher when I did have to deliver. Like, for example, I taught reception for 2 years, and actually we had to teach PE. We had to, we didn't have specialists coming in when I was teaching reception. That was really hard. It was really hard because I didn't specialize in that area. Those of, teachers who are listening in will probably be able to resonate with me when I say that when I did my teaching degree, I did a couple of modules at best on PE. That doesn't mean that I become a PE expert. It's, you have to then go and learn and find out a little bit more, and you have to go through those experiences. So when I was in NQT, in fact, I was an NQT teaching year 2 and then completed my NQT teaching reception. And I was more comfortable having the children in my class than I was having them in the hall or having them outside. But what I know that I needed to be better at was actually learning how to manage the group. Then, if I could do that, I could manage them pretty much in any environment. So learnings from that now are around understanding the stages of development. So where are the children in terms of their learning and their development? Now, people who work in this area, particularly with young people, will know that, the basic of the younger the children are, the more egocentric they are. The older they are, their behavior patterns change simply because their brain, develops the capacity to be able to think critically, as opposed to when they're younger. They don't want to share when they're younger. The sharing and lending develops as the children get older. The other thing to consider is around internal behaviors. So things that that the children will be able to self-manage and self-control, but based on the learning environment that you have. And then the other consideration would be the external behaviors. So things that potentially could be out of your control. So that might be to do with friendships outside of school. It might be to do with home life. It might be to do with siblings, things that you may not know firsthand. And I understand that there could be safeguarding implications of certain pieces of information, but the more we know about the children that we're working with, the more effective I think we can be, whether you're a coach or whether you're a teacher, in helping to help them learn and helping them to manage how they feel, how they act, and how they behave. Because ultimately, we talk about behaviour management. What we want to do, in essence, initially, is have prevention strategies. Because if they do show behaviours that are disruptive, it affects their learning. So if we always go back to what's important, right? They're learners. They're here to learn in whatever context it is. They're here to learn. So how can we maximize their learning? One of the things we can do is actually understand who they are, understand where they are in their development, understand the things the things on the peripheral, like who are they friends with, what do they like to do, what do they like to watch, what do they like to listen to. Are there things going on at home that I actually do need to know about, because this might affect how they behave? Like, you take the pandemic, I think this is, the pandemic's a fine example of that, that there's a lot out there anyway, and I know that teachers will know this, but I think we'd be naive to think that being away from routine, being away from structure, that children being away from friends, also considering the fact that you might be a parent who's lost their job, that then is going to impact upon how you now live within your home and how you live your life. You then may, as a parent, become anxious. The child could see that might then, I don't know, make them anxious because of what's going on. So it's going to be quite a difficult time when the children come back to train or when the children go back to school, because as a result of something that we've never, you know, a lot of us have never been through in our lifetime, being able to manage those is going to be really important. So some of the other things that I would also suggest would be, I've spoken about learning, is to initially focus on the learning. So whether you're out there, like I said, in the playground, whether you're in the classroom, it's have a solution focused approach. And ultimately what this can then do is also help children to self-reflect and help them to consider their behaviors and think about their behaviors and what their behaviors are impacting. It's impacting on their ability to be able to learn. It's impacting on their capacity to be able to get better at whatever it might be. The other thing would be to notice and to be better at noticing. Now, there's also an element of it's knowing what to notice for and what to look for. So I'll give an example of when I was early on in my teaching career, I thought, right, the best strategy would be if I'm delivering a session, and this example I'll give when I was actually delivering a PE session. If I'm giving an instruction to children, I expect all of them to look at me, to not be bouncing any footballs or basketballs, to not be fidgeting. I need all attention based on
and speaking as the kid that was always bouncing the basketball, I know that it's not always going to happen. Yeah. So how do you deal with that or not deal with that?
Yeah, and exactly, and it's as an NQT or as somebody who's new in teaching, you're still learning the trade of teaching. You're still learning that, and as much as people say, oh, but primary school teachers, you get 6 weeks, you get 6 weeks in the summer, you get time off in Easter and just, you know, and Christmas and that type of thing. You know, you're going in as a primary school teacher, you're having to teach 11 subjects. You're not going to be an expert in all 11 subjects. You know, when you're teaching history, geography, music, science, maths, English, PE, it's, you know, so it can be really overwhelming, that in itself. Then it's a case of you need to now also be able to manage the group of children that you have. So as well as learning and developing subject knowledge of all these different subjects, what you're also doing is actually learning how to teach, what to teach, how do I manage the group of children that I have. That's really challenging. So I think there also has to be an appreciation for the individuals, actually, that, you know, you're not going to get it right in the beginning and it's not going to be perfect. So in that example, for me at that time as a new teacher, my perception of managing that group was, I don't want anybody bouncing any footballs or basketballs. I would like everybody to look at me and listen to me. Whereas as time has gone on, where I've evolved is that actually my job is to have a better understanding of the individual needs of each child and appreciate that some children might need that. Some children actually might need to be standing in a particular place or sat down, you know, instead of standing up. Some might need to be bouncing the basketball, but it doesn't mean to say that they're not listening. So these things, particularly for me, have come over time, because you're still, like I said, you're still learning the trade, and there are many aspects to that. The other thing, which I think teachers do quite well, very well, in fact, right at the beginning, is about establishing clear boundaries. So I think, especially after the pandemic, that's going to be crucial, but having flexibility within that, because although we know that children need and benefit from structure and routine, it's also bearing in mind that they've just been through an experience of having things that are very unstructured.
Yeah.
So you can't go from 0 to 10 just like that. I think that there's I'm somebody personally who I think that actually, because it's been very unstructured, they are going to need some structure coming back. However, what I also understand is that it's going to need to be carefully tailored. I'm going to have to be a lot more patient. I'm going to need to also become better knowledgeable and better equipped with some of the things that some of these children may have gone through, which will be individual to them. And then almost it's you're tailoring it and individualizing it.
And I think that's massive. So some of the things, like when we've gone through, as we've said before, we've done numerous webinars, we've looked through strategies. I've become much more of an expert on risk assessing than I was before. And the thing that you're going to miss out on is little elements of, whether it be a coaching session or a PE lesson or a lesson within a classroom. You might not be able to do some things, but the thing that you can always do, and this is something that's run through all of our discussions and all of our podcasts, is that the focus should be on that individual, and that's going to make everything easier. And I suppose you're absolutely right. That is your prevention strategy for any disruptive behaviour. If you can really know that group, you can set everyone up in a way that means that they're not going to do the disruptive behaviour because they're doing what's best for them. And I'm always staggered. I mean, admittedly, I work with a lot of children every week, but I'm staggered by the degree to which teachers know their children and the detail, and they know their quirks. They know that what it means if one of them is facing away, and they know. So I suppose from that point of view, it's just for us, it's trying to instill that confidence that actually you are doing absolutely the right thing. And the fact that the context is now a sports hall rather than your classroom with your carpet spaces, that doesn't change what you already know and what you are already trying to do.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say that was one thing that I've always added in, that whenever I introduce a lesson or if I'm working with a new group of children, say this is our classroom, and I look around, it's like, but it's a field. It's like expectations are the same as to what you do in a classroom. It's just you've got trees, you've got grass, or it might be the playground. But as you say, knowing those little quirks, but then just taking those expectations from the classroom, an indoor classroom, to an outdoor classroom. And then eventually I had to buy in when it came to that over a period of time, that they knew these were the expectations and kind of what to expect. But that was an ever evolving process, as you say. It didn't happen overnight. It took weeks and then months, and slowly but surely you get there.
Yeah, I suppose almost as a sort of parting top tip, I think I know your answer to this already, Manisha, but would you say that the best thing to do if you're not that confident as a PE teacher or as a coach or anyone doing any sort of sport is just to dive in and just to give it as much of a go as you can, because ultimately it's that experience that's gonna get you across the line?
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And I think so those who are coaches and are listening in and have actually done the youth modules and the advanced youth award, Murph does this fantastic module on actually how to manage behaviors. So some of those strategies teachers will know already. Things like you don't go, I spoke about you can't go from 0 to 10, because what that will do, and what I mean by that is, if we start off, so you've done the collaborative working, you've spoken to the children, like, Phil, like you said, you've established boundaries, and, that they understand that it's the class, that whether they're outside, whether they're on the field or in the classroom, it's still a learning environment. And so you've done that and they understand that. You notice something with regards to their behaviors. So you start to vary your voice, your body language might change so that they know that you've noticed it, but you verbally may not begin to say anything just yet.
Yeah.
You can't then go from that straight on to, right, that's it. You're going to miss any more, no more PE for you now. We can't do that, because what will happen is this, and look, I'm guilty of doing that in the early years, because you're still, like I said, you're still learning the trade of learning how to be a teacher. That to children, when actually when the consequence really matters, they won't take it seriously, because what they'll know is, well, I'm going to do this straight away. That's, I'm going to get told, right, you've got to miss PE, or I need to see your parents, or whatever the sanction might be. So I think that my top tips would be this: it's work in stages. So you might begin with varying your voice, adapting your body language, and then non-verbal signs to illustrate and show that you're aware and you know that they are not adhering to this charter, or that you have put together collaboratively within your learning environment. Then what you might do is, if the behaviours then continue, is now you're going to start using verbal cues, and now you're going to be referring to the charter that you've put in place. Do you remember when what does that say? Okay. Do you feel that your behaviours are, so you start, it's getting them to understand that actually, and again, it's about the child self-awareness. We want to put the onus and responsibility on the child so that they can take onus of how they're behaving, and how they're acting and how they're feeling. If it still continues and you've already set the boundaries and the consequences, you might need to now consider, determined by the nature of it, do you need to go to one of those consequences? But even the consequences or the sanctions would also need to be layered. So you wouldn't go to the worst one, to begin with. So I think that if, what we want to be able to do is to put intervention strategies in place so that it avoids actually going to the one where I need to see your parents, or, I want you to go and see the head teacher, or whoever, or whatever it might be. And if we can do that, and it goes back to what we've said earlier, which is understand the context of your children, the makeup of the group that you have, and understand the development stages, because a lot of the behaviours will be associated to where they are in their learning and their development.
And you know what? I think that last sort of little statement is, you could almost frame that quote and put behaviour management for PE and within schools. You could almost put a tick next to that quote, because I think that underpins everything. And I think that's a really great point to end on. I think we could probably go on for another couple of hours, but I think we're getting away from bite size if we do. So I would love to have you back and possibly talk about this some more, or potentially another topic in the future, Manisha, because I think your expertise is clear to see, and your experience in football and teaching combined is second to none. It's almost unheard of, the level of expertise in both. So it's been a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you. It's been great. It's been great for me to be able to reminisce when I was teaching, and and also acknowledge, and I think this is really important for everybody, just acknowledge that we're always learning, and whenever you're new into something, it's okay to make mistakes, because you're not going to get it right. And it was no different for me when I took a transition into football, that it was almost reinventing yourself and just enjoying the journey, and like I said, that it's okay to make mistakes.
Fantastic.
What thing to finish on, and to echo that, to make mistakes is absolutely fine, and that's how people learn and get better. But no, just to echo what Chris said, it's been fantastic. So thank you very much, and I'm sure the listeners would have taken lots of ideas, or hopefully it's given that little light bulb moment that they can take into September.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Manisha. Speak to you soon.
Bye.